Good morning. Welcome to End Times Talk. I hope you're all doing well. Um, I get this feeling in the pit of my stomach that we're much further along in this whole thing going on with the energy crisis and all that stuff than what we think that we are. Um, I actually have found some stuff that I wasn't aware of, and I'm not saying I'm the most knowledgeable person or wise person on the planet. There's a million other people before me, gazillion other people before me that are much smarter than me, much more aware. I look at things a little differently because of my high functioning autism. I would say that I don't exactly see things. I see sometimes other methods to the way things are done in this world. And I think that's probably why a lot of people come to this channel. In fact, is just kind of the way I look at things, a little bit outside the box than the normal, what you're going to hear. Anyways, I have a lot to go through today, but as I go through it, the more and more it's going to start to make sense. I feel like I've organized things in a way that will help you to understand best what God, I feel, is like putting on my spirit. I really feel like God's putting this on my spirit that this is all coming. Jesus says, "You shall know them by their fruits, not by their words, by their fruits." And they're not only doing this stuff, but they're even saying they're doing it. So it's their fruits and their words are aligning up with what their plans are. And yesterday was the last day of the Bilderberg meeting, and there was this whole itinerary of things that they wanted to get done. And I'm going to start here today, but I have a lot to talk about today, an absolute lot to talk about. But the stuff they wanted to talk about was AI, Arctic security, China, digital finance, energy diversification, Europe, global trade. I think these are all very important. The Middle East, all right, the transatlantic defense industrial relationship, Ukraine, the USA, the future of warfare, and the West. So it all really aligns with the things that are happening right now. And this is their own, not their own page or anything like that, but it's their own document that come out with this stuff on there. And so they put this list out so that way people know what's coming, and what they've been talking about. And with that being said, um, give me a moment here. I gotta and again, this fluctuates a little bit. All right, it's been up, $10. It's been down $10. And so on and so forth. Sometimes it fluctuates $20 or $30, but we're talking about physical oil prices, physical oil, not the futures market that they project on Google. When you go in and you type in, oil prices today, they're going to show you a graph, and that graph is a futures prediction. That's the way it is right now, selling and all that stuff because of what they're predicting for the future. I'm sorry, I'm very congested this morning. I apologize. So, with that being said, and let me blow this up here. The physical oil prices have hit record highs near $150 a barrel as the Hormuz crisis worsens. And this was just a few days ago, 6 days ago. The physical oil hit $150 a barrel. And it's down to about 140 something for physical oil right now. Um, but it's still up. We're right back to where we were before this whole ceasefire. All right, the ceasefire I don't think means anything. And with that being said, give me a moment here. The Economic Times, the markets paper, is showing a panicked race for barrels grips global oil market. Prices up as much as $140 a barrel. Excuse excuse me, $140 a barrel. I haven't really used my voice that much this morning. I've been, just focusing on gathering this information and doing some research. I dug pretty deep and I found some interesting stuff that I'm going to talk about today that I think we're much further along into this lockdown situation than what they're telling the public. I'm going to be honest with you. It's not good. And I'm not, I get sick of people treating me like I'm a fear monger. Now, I care enough about people to tell them what I'm finding, and what is being said out there, and and trying to put it together and make some sense out of all of this, through a biblical filter and through a logical conspiracy theorist mind. I'm a conspiracy theorist, but I'm a logical one. I don't get off into willy-nilly, birds or drones, and things like that. I'm sure there's some that are out there that the government uses, but the whole bunch of them, the whole lot of them, absolutely not. Just silly stuff. They got silly stuff out there, and I don't subscribe to all that stuff, but I look at things for what they are, not for what they're telling me. In the sense of, I look and see, like, what are the actions of these people? What have they been throughout history? And then you look at what they tell you they're going to do to you, and that goes hand in hand with what they're doing to us. You know what I mean? So when you start to put all these pieces together, you start to form a picture. And it's I think something that the Lord's put on my heart to do for people, to be a watchman, and so I'm not trying to scare people. I'm trying to prepare them. So as we move forward in all of this, I want people to know that I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to make sure you're at least ahead of time. Now, here's the thing. For the people that have heard these lives where I'm talking about all this stuff for, the past month and a half, right? The past month and a half, I've been talking about this, literally dissecting it bit by bit by bit, and trying to, I have given people fair warning to prepare. So when it really starts happening and it kicks off and it gets really intense, I mean, I did what I could do. I'm not getting anybody who's struggling because they didn't listen. I don't have to worry about that situation on my hands, because if I don't talk about this, God's going to hold me reliable and liable for what happens when I could have stepped up to the plate and warned people and said something. So I've been doing that. And then as soon as the ceasefire hit, a whole bunch of people thought, well, this is the back off, and this is full tilt boogie. They're bringing that plane in, trying to ease it into that landing. The engines have been cut. We're gliding. It's going to be an emergency landing, but how soft is this thing touch down when it finally hits? What's the reality of that look like? Because I'm telling you right now, what I see is a incrementalization, a spoon feeding happening right now, building up to a chaotic situation, like what they would maybe have in the summer. I mean, I've always believed, and I'm going to go down this road today, and I know I'm probably holding up the live, and I could be talking about a whole lot more, but I've always believed that there is a purge type scenario coming to America. Now, I'm not talking about the way that the purge movies play out and this one day thing. I'm talking about an event that's so chaotic that everybody goes buck wild. I mean, I've always believed it's coming. I don't talk about that enough. I believe that there is a season of violence, abrupt violence, that's coming. And I don't know if Christians are going to see it. I don't know if the tribulations or saints are going to see it. I can't tell you who's going to see it and who's not going to see it. Okay. But what I can tell you is it's coming. And when they have, I'm talking like 5 or 6 movies of the purge. And for those of, are not very strong Christians, I do not suggest watching them. They are very graphic. Okay. But as a watchman, I have to watch things for predictive programming to be able to come back and report to you what I see them saying that they're going to do. Because the enemy has to tell us what he's going to do to us. We need to be not paying attention to his words, but paying attention to what he's spouting off at the mouth, so we know our enemy because I'll tell you right now, our enemy knows you. And so you have this purge type scenario that's building up, and this build up to this release of violence that's coming. You saw it in the what they call the summer of love, where you had all those riots in America during the lockdown. That was an incrementalization of that purge, just easing it in, giving you a taste of what they have possible, and to unleash the unruly mob and the nihilists and the atheists, and ferment a social cataclysm, which in all its horror will show clearly to the nations the effects of absolute atheism, the origin of savagery, and of the most bloody turmoil. I'll tell you what, I have that whole thing memorized by now. I probably don't even have to show the document anymore of Pike's 3 World Wars. But I'm telling you, it's coming. And when it comes, there is a season where you're going to have to weather the violence. Christians, if you're here, if this happens in the next half a year, this summer, okay, or next summer, if we're still here, all right, Christians, you could see this in America. There's been plenty of destabilizations that have taken place in the world. And America, you went by without a scrape on your knee. You didn't fall off your bike. You didn't get a scrape on your knee. But places like Mexico, those people feared for their lives when the cartel was running around. And the different riots that have happened in France, and the violence of October 7th in Israel, and all this warfare that's been happening since the beginning of sorrow started. Americans sat back and acted like they're untouchable. Like, you are the kid that can't get bullied because you're the star quarterback, right? Wrong. And Christians especially have that mindset that they don't think that they can see something rough come. But I'm telling you, God's going to use this to stir even the most hardened of hearts back to him. There are people out there that know Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and they reject him because of their hardened heart. I remember one time I was talking to a guy, and actually, this was back in my days where I struggled with drugs extremely heavily. And, I knew this drug dealer. And I'll be honest with you, this guy moved stuff. Okay, we'll say that. And I talked to him about Jesus. I thought, I'm struggling here, but I'm at least gonna proclaim Jesus in the darkness, right? And I did, and he said, "You know what? I believe you, Josh, and I'm gonna accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, but when I'm ready." And I'm telling you, there's coming a day when a shift is gonna take place, and there is nothing you can do to stop it. And I'm trying to prepare my brothers, my sisters in Christ, but also those hardened hearts to get ready for what's about to take place, because God's about to fill up those churches, whether you like so or not. God is about to fill up the live chats. They're going to be so busy, no one even going to be able to see your comment because it's going to scroll by so quickly. Because God is about to make a big move, and there's about to be a chastisement, I believe, like the world has never seen. And it's a rebuke for the Christians to get with the program, and it's also something that's going to lead even the hardest, most stoutest of individuals to Jesus, to the cross. They're going to throw themselves at the foot of the cross. You mark my words. You mark my words. I don't care what people think about me and thinking that something intense is coming, because I'm telling you, the writing on the wall is there, and it ain't going away. It's not going away. It's right in your face. You are staring right down the barrel of it. Hold on one second. So obviously, most people know that the U.S. is going to begin blockading ships in the Strait of Hormuz today. And the Iran talks have failed, obviously, miserably. And I knew that they were going to. You can't send an Antichrist to do the King of Kings job. Think about that for a moment. You can't send the spirit of Antichrist in to do the King of Kings job. Jesus is the only one that can truly broker peace in anything. There's this false sense of peace and whatnot that is brewing. But mankind is chaotic. And yeah, you'll have a short little season of peace when the Antichrist comes in, but it's not lasting peace. Only Jesus can do that. And Jesus starts in your heart, in your spirit. So obviously the Iran talks have failed. That they sent Jared Kushner in, I think it was, to do it. And it's funny too, because he was supposed to be brokering the deal before the war ever broke out. And I remember seeing him at the table with the Iranian ambassador that they were talking to or whatever. And war started the next few moments from that. You know what I mean? And it's created the worst energy crisis that the world has ever seen. We haven't even really begun to see the ripple effect from this yet. It's beginning. It's starting. It's finally hitting us a little bit. And I told you right around the middle of September, middle of April, you'll start to see the trickle of this thing. I said, give it about another week and a half, 2 weeks, and you're going to start to see it. And I want to talk about that stuff today. But with Donald Trump blockading Iran and their access to the Strait of Hormuz, this just creates a double wall, and nobody can get through. Nothing's going to get through. This is and in fact, people can get mad at me. I don't care. It almost seems like they're working together to do this, and they're laughing behind the scenes, laughing behind the scenes at us. Drinking their whiskey and on the rocks and having their Cuban cigars and just sitting there laughing at our expense. Bunch of fat cat banker, politician, idiots laughing at our expense, watching the world burn and watching all of us suffer through it. Because that's a lot of what's really going on here. If you want to know the truth, that's the truth. I mean, if people really care to know the truth, but can you accept the truth? Are you willing to accept the truth? Because most people can't handle the truth. You can't handle the truth. You can't. All right. But a lot of people out here, especially the ones that come to my channel, y'all are pretty nitty gritty, and I got to give you that, because I don't hold back any punches, and I'm not going to sugarcoat nothing. I've had more unsubscriptions and people that hate me. It's just ridiculous. But I ain't going to stop doing what I think is the right way to do things, and that's sometimes being a little blunt, sometimes being a little in your face and up forward. And I think that you can at least respect that about me. I have the guts to do it. I'm not going to mamby-pamby, patty cake you all the way to the finish line. I want to stir up God's army. And I'm not saying I'm Joshua who fought the Battle of Jericho. I'm saying I was named after him. And I want to put a little fire of God in you. Not that I can do it, but stir it up. Stir up the workings of God within you and stir up his Holy Spirit within you. Because I'm telling you, time is short, whether you want to believe so or not. But how much are we going to see of this? I don't know, but I'm going to prepare for the worst. And I'm going to be praying and asking Jesus for the best. Because it's all up to him. This is not your roller coaster. You don't control all the gears and all that stuff and the controls for this roller coaster. You are just on it, and I'll be honest with you, I'm half wondering if we're even buckled in. This is the wildest ride I have ever thought I could be on. Just life in general and the things that have happened in it, the good and the bad. There's been some intense times in my life, and I think intense times have only just begun. There's a quickening taking place. Prophetic time is speeding up so rapidly. And people want to act like nothing's really happening and just still living their lives the same way as if they don't hear the distant thunders. You hear the distant thunders. You hear it crack. You see the lightning crackling off in the distance and the rumble of thunders. You feel it. You feel the tremor beneath your feet, kind of like, in Jurassic Park, when the T-Rex is stomping around and you see that cup of water and the Jeep starting to jiggle, it's coming. You see all the signs. I've been showing you the signs. Hold on 1 second. Obviously, the Iran talks have collapsed, and it's heightened fears of prolonged energy shock. Prolonged energy shock. And I think that that would be a good place to start really talking about this, because, you know, they want to make it seem like they got it all figured out and everything's going back to normal. They want to keep you on that balance as much as possible before they actually can implement their lockdown, because then that minimizes chaos when it comes to this transition. That minimizes the chaos. Oh, this is just shock. You're just getting slapped around a little bit. You didn't get punched in the teeth or nothing. Calm down. You know, but that's the way that they want to sell it to you. You know, that you're just taking a couple of bruises. You ain't got cut yet. What are you crying for? What are you crying for? That's the way they want you to look at things. Oh, because you're concerned. It's a shame. It's a shame to be prepared. They literally shame us for just being on point. You're shamed if you're right. You're shamed if you prepare. You're shamed if you're logical. You're shamed. You know, everybody's got to live in fantasy land. What is it with this country? Just fantasy land. Blows my mind away, man. Absolutely blows my mind away. Prolonged energy shock. Now, with that being said, I want to show you a little video here. Hold on a second. I want to show you this video, and we're going to start here, and we're going to kind of go into a couple of things here. I just want to show you a couple of posts here. I'll play this.
That up. Avoiding the climate lockdown by the WBCSD. That rolls off the tongue. That stands for the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. 3M, Apple, Bloomberg, BMW, Chevron, BP, Dow, DuPont, Google, IBM, IKEA,
all involved.
Kellogg's, Nestle, Procter & Gamble. It just keeps going. This was published way back in October 2020, so it's not even a new thing. They say in the near future, the world may need to resort to lockdowns again, this time to tackle a climate emergency. Wait, how could the climate create an emergency that we need a lockdown to solve? Who cares? They say under a climate lockdown, governments would limit private vehicle use, ban the consumption of red meat, and impose extreme energy-saving measures. Fossil fuel companies would have to stop drilling. To avoid such a scenario, we have to overhaul economics and do capitalism differently. That up, avoiding a climate lockdown by the WB.
So, right there, that tells you everything you need to know, that they've been planning this for a minute. They have been planning this for a minute. And with that being said, you know, and I'll just show it to you. Here's the actual article from the Wayback Machine. I had to go into the Wayback Machine because they got rid of this thing. You go to their actual website, you can't find this anymore from the 21st. And I mean, just going there, you can't find the 21st of October 2020. At least I couldn't. I don't know if someone else can go in there and figure it out, but I couldn't figure it out. And I'm not an idiot. Right? So I had to go back to the Wayback Machine to find this article, and sure enough, everything he said is there. In the near future, right here, in the near future, the world may need to resort to lockdowns again, this time to tackle climate emergency. Right there. Right here, look at it. Here's what he said. Under a climate lockdown, governments would limit private vehicle use. Why? Why? Why does it need to be that? Ban consumption of red meat and impose extreme energy-saving measures, while fossil fuel companies would have to stop drilling. Oh, okay, so to just keep making it worse, right? No wonder George Soros and Warren Buffett invested in a shit ton. Excuse my language, Lord, in a crap ton of coal. They really put their money into coal. All right, and it says so. They're talking about how to avoid such a scenario. But this has been going on, and this shows you that their meetings, their stuff that they're doing They're talking about the climate lockdown, so now they're going to try to talk about avoiding the climate lockdown. They're literally telling you what they're going to do to you. They're telling you what they're going to do to you. So, with that being said, I want to play this next clip here. And I want you to listen to all of this. And this is Catherine Austin Fitts, and she's a banker right now, so she understands the economy, but she also worked for the Bush administration. And I'm not saying she's, a clean individual, hasn't done nothing wrong in her life. But what I am saying is that the information she's talking about is pretty important, and I think it's worth a listen on my channel. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and play this.
Farmers plant in the spring. Right now, we are shutting down the critical ingredients to most European factories who make fertilizer, right? Okay. And so by the time that gets through, whenever it gets through, it's going to be too late to make the fertilizer. You're going to miss the whole spring season. So I don't know. I just saw a headline: Goldman Sachs, leading member of the New York Fed, says that it's going to be shut down for 21 days, right?
Yeah.
Miss the planting season. Okay, so if you look at the material coming through that's critical to chip production, the material coming through the straits that's critical to fertilizer and food, and the material coming through that's critical to energy, you're talking about massive dislocation of the global economy. And if it goes on for long enough, I mean, we have Peru, Thailand, other people talking about doing COVID kind of shutdowns to save gas and fuel.
Yeah.
Right. But you're talking about intentionally shutting down the global economy. And it didn't start with Iran, and it didn't start with the United States. It started with the City of London. So Lloyd's of London shut down the straits with all their insurance company friends and reinsurance company friends, right? So the city shuts down the straits, and now the Iran is helping supposedly to keep it shut down.
Yeah.
Do you buy that story that the U.S. military is helpless?
No, but what I struggle with is it seems like a lot of countries and citizens across the world are going to suffer as a result of this war and as a result of the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. So there will be global disorder and chaos to a large extent. And even if you look at Japan, they're especially vulnerable. But in the Second World War, Japan did Pearl Harbor, at least that's the common story, because they were shut off from the oil market. So when countries are in desperate position, they're going to take desperate measures. So this could easily lead to a much larger world war, this conflict in the Middle East. So that's a huge gamble then that the global elite, for example, are taking, because they run a risk themselves too. If we have a nuclear escalation and a nuclear holocaust, what's in it for them?
So well, what's in it for them is implementing the control grid and depopulation together.
Yeah.
That's what's in it for them. If this is, because we don't know yet. I think it's too early. I can't tell whether you're looking at massive incompetence on the basis of the U.S. or you're looking at an intentional desire to shut down. So this is COVID 2.0.
Yeah.
Because this is how you shut down. This is a new excuse to shut down to preserve energy and food.
That was insanely weird. I'm not even going to lie. Insanely weird. I'm really sorry. I apologize about that. I don't know what happened. I just got a text from one of my moderators and is saying that, well, I guess that's crazy. Anyways, so because I was here watching this. So what I was trying to say is that there's censorship that's already coming, that's already being established, it seems like, and it's funny because yeah, that's weird how it froze up. Yeah, I guess I just have to keep talking. I don't know. I just talked a whole bunch and everybody's telling me it froze up. I'm sorry. I apologize. Technical difficulties. Goodness gracious. That was weird. Story of my life. Anyway, okay. So what I was saying is that just like with the COVID-19 lockdowns, they had all this censorship. They were beginning, to anybody who spoke out against the jabby was trying to, say that, they were trying to come at them and they were, locking up their accounts and channels were getting deleted and all this stuff. And they have, a 3-strike system with YouTube, and so, but they have new guidelines and you had to agree to the guidelines. All right. That there was no wonder the numbers were going down like crazy. I noticed that the numbers were going down like crazy. I was like, what is going on? Like, yeah, that's really weird. Really, really weird. Completely froze up. Wow. So anyways, I paused it and then I was sitting there talking. I must have been talking to myself the whole time. Yeah, that's wild. Anyway, so there's a really open-ended agreement made between, like, Google and YouTube and their users and all that stuff. And so it's real open-ended on the censorship side of it, of like what you can say, what you can't say. And they even have it set up to where once you say a certain thing, they can just shut you down. They don't even need to give you a points, a system anymore, and warnings and all that stuff. They can just, all right, we don't like what this dude is saying. They can turn you right off now. They've changed it. And so I remember when they did this, it was like a year ago. And what's funny is that, like I said, it reminds me of the COVID-19 restrictions that were happening. The COVID-19 restrictions that were happening. And the sorry, I've had such a brain fart since my everything wasn't working. I don't know what happened. Anyways, I'm going to go back to the video now, but I was just trying to comment about how, what she said triggered me to talk about how, like, oh yeah, that was what it was. In the Philippines, people are being arrested. That's what started the whole conversation. Why I, was talking. And it's funny because, there's literally news articles were saying, well, if you talk about this as an energy lockdown, you're gonna get arrested. And so they're actively arresting people for coming out and saying things. So they're trying to silence their opposition. Why would you arrest someone for their opinion? That makes no sense. Just for their opinion. Now, especially when, work in a place of business and because of your opinion, you're not doing something. I guess, you could probably be, fired or arrested for that or whatever. But in the Philippines right now, they're arresting people for talking about that a lockdown could be coming. So that censorship, in my opinion, is beginning. And then I'm telling people, warning people, the stuff for YouTube censorship is very open-ended. And there's a reason that a lot of YouTubers play it safe with what they talk about, because that strike system is there and they don't even want to have a warning or a strike. You see what I'm saying? And so, it seems to me that if you're going to start arresting your opposition, that's almost kind of seemed like what they were doing during the lockdown in the beginning too, arresting their opposition. and all the political persecution and stuff that was taking place. It seems like that in other countries right now is rearing its head. So hold on, I'll click this here.
I think the big problem here is famine. So
Famine.
you have seen the new administration in the United States systematically cut the domestic funds that are available to support food for poor people in emergencies, as well as the USAID and State Department aid to protect countries that have emergencies, like food. So you have, I don't know, 25 maybe $billion traditionally that the US had available to stop famines. That money is all cut. And now you have something that's creating the conditions of famine. So, to me, that's very disturbing.
So she makes a great point, and she's saying the funds to protect us from famine that were there aren't there now. And the conditions to bring about famine are being implemented. And I'll tell you, and I'm not gonna mince words here. I'm gonna come at you straight, and I'm not trying to be graphic or trying to be like say crazy things to get likes or clicks or whatever, and give people juicy, crazy information. But I mean, cannibalism is a real thing, and they say that stuff happens within a 2-week period. I was talking about it the other day, and I'll tell you a true opinion of mine, and I've said it in past lives. But I'm going to go this far with it. Remember for a while how you had this huge campaign. Can you raise your hand in the live chat if you remember this massive campaign? T-shirts, stickers, memes, all this stuff about bacon, 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 bacon. I mean, I remember like there was during the pandemic-ish towards the end, I noticed this huge campaign about just thinking bacon is cool. Now everybody says bacon is cool. It's like they programmed people's minds to think bacon is cool. And I don't know if you remember that or not, but if you do, like say I remember in the live chat, like help me out here. Put it in the comment section or something, like help me out. Because don't make me look like a fool in front of everybody, because I know I'm not crazy. I remember seeing this campaign about bacon. All right. And so with that being said, okay, I mean, I could, I'll even show you because I want to prove it to people here. All right. All right. So I'm just going to show you my screen here. Hold on. And I'm just going to bring up Google here. So I just searched in Google and, I typed in New York Times Instagram post about cannibalism, and it's right here. This was the picture right here that they used, the New York Times post about cannibalism. And it's got a fork and a knife and a severed hand. All right. And I'll go back. Right here it is. Right here it is. This is what they said, okay, is that cannibalism has a time and a place. Some recent books, films, and shows suggest that the time is now. Can you stomach it? So they're pushing that out there, right? And I mean, I'll go as far as going back here. And there's even, because I've already looked at this, see, it blocks you from reading it. You can't even read it unless you have a New York Times subscription. I would love to read that right now, man. I would love to read it. But see how they paywall you like that? When it comes to the New York Times article on a taste for cannibalism. If anybody has a subscription to the New York Times, would you please look this up for me and email it to me? I'll check my email in a little bit. Please, if you have a New York Times subscription, or you can get this article and like a screenshot of it or something, that would be awesome. But yeah, so anyways, there's this campaign for bacon that's been going on, okay? And they've been pushing their cannibalism on us for quite some time. And they say, okay, hear me out here. And I don't know anything about this. I'm going by other research that has been done. They say, and cannibals say, that human flesh tastes like an extremely salty pork. So it's almost like they have been, just like with like the pizza stuff. I'm gonna be honest with you. I've never talked about this publicly, and I mean, you know, when it comes to like Little Caesars and Pizza Hut and some of the local pizza places around me and the places around me, I've grown to. It's an easy meal to eat, when it comes to having a pizza pie, like, and so it's usually cheap too. It costs like $5-10, for a couple of slices at like $1 slice place, or maybe $10, for an actual pizza at Little Caesars or something like that, right? But all throughout, and I remember the Ninja Turtles specifically, just pizza, 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 pizza. They just drilling it down your throat, like this campaign about pizza, and it was to like normalize the talk about pizza. You know what I mean? And I'm just putting that out there, right? And then so you have this bacon campaign that's meant to, put it in the minds of people. Oh, pork, 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 pork. And so, it's something that always just stood out to me. It's like, are they programming people to think that it's okay to eat people and that it don't taste bad or nothing like that? And then they have all the celebrities, and everybody wants to be a celebrity. Get your guru, get your cannibalism on, get your guru. And so it's funny. You have all these celebrities that are at these human meat eating parties and stuff. I mean, even Katy Perry has admitting to being at a human flesh party. Like, it's a thing. Okay. It's a thing in Hollywood. It is very satanic. All right. So I'm putting that out there. All right. All right. And I'll be honest with you. I love bacon, man. Dude, jalapeno poppers is where it's at. Ask any of my friends and my family, people that are close to me. I'll eat jalapeno poppers every other day if I could. You know what I mean? Just that amount of cheese, I don't think is that great for you. But I could eat a whole pan of jalapeno poppers. You don't even have to argue with me about that, or wrestle me down to eat a whole pan of jalapeno poppers. I do that by myself. I'll smash that thing, dude. I'm not even kidding. But I'm putting it out there that that's the way that they're programming us. I believe that's what I'm seeing. And then now they're talking about famine. And it's funny because when the fertilizer hasn't come through the Strait of Hormuz, and the farmers are already starting to need the fertilizer for their fields to have things done at a proper time, and this stuff isn't going down, all right, that means that it is going to be a stunted crop at best if the straits open up. Now that they're blocking the Strait of Hormuz completely, now you got a double layer. You got the U.S. blocking Iran's blockade. So Iran's got their stupid blockade, and then the U.S. has their blockade outside of Iran's blockade. They're making sure nothing gets through. It's almost like they're working together, like I said earlier. It's like, it's kind of weird. It's like, that this is going to tip the scales into a new world order of what you've said, JD Vance, globalism and trade, and it's absolutely a new world order of alliances and all this stuff. That's what they're talking about. That's what they're doing. And that's what they want to censor me talking about today. They want to censor me. Like, I couldn't, embarrassing, man, to say the least, but I'm too far into this to turn around, right? So people hopefully will figure out, I'm just going to fast forward after the live is done, and maybe they'll notice that this moment of, where I froze or cut out or whatever it was, that they can get past it and everything's working again. Anyways, the damage has been done already from the fertilizer stuff in parts of the world that they were already supposed to be planning. Like right now, in places like, Missouri and southward, they're already supposed to be planning and getting stuff going for stuff. And then as things move up into the, the northern part of things in America, and just the, northern hemisphere in general, they're going to need that fertilizer, and it ain't there. It ain't there. And so, unless you have extra fertilizer, and I suggest composting. Even if you don't have a garden, start composting, because if you give a gardener compost, maybe they'll share some of their food, because without the compost, you don't have the food. So just a little tip out there. If you ain't got room to garden, you got room to create fertilizer for your gardening friends. Put it that way. Hold on. Let me get a drink here. So there's a lot going on. And I'll be honest with you, this lady is hilarious to me. The way that I wish I could present news the way that this lady does. It's just absolutely funny. But I want you to just hear the first part of what she says, because she goes into other topics with this. But I want you to hear the first part of what this lady has to say. And she's from Australia, and she's talking about what's happening in Australia because of all this. But I want you to hear the first part of what she says here.
Breaking news here in batshit bonkers Britain. Over in Australia, Anthony Albanese called a nationwide address at 7 p.m. He said the Australian nation is going to go through a period of extreme hardship, which feels a bit like energy lockdowns, as many of us predicted a seamless move from COVID lockdowns to energy lockdowns. He talked about rationing. He talked about people having to give up driving their cars or drive at slower speeds. I mean, I'm excited for ration books. I'm sure they'll come along with a digital ID. Maybe I can even get a booster as well. In other news, Artemis 2 launches off into space. And for a brief moment in time, everybody was looking to the skies. And I think that can only be a good thing. And finally...
So, yeah. I tell you, that lady cracks me up, man. That cracked me up. I don't know about y'all, but that, oh man. Yeah, that one. Oh goodness. That's funny. But so they're preparing their people for lockdowns. And they're doing it in the Philippines. I told you they're arresting people that are talking about energy lockdowns already. So it's happening. It's absolutely happening. But I wish that the chaotic news got brought to us more peacefully like that. Grab a flowering tree and just swing on it a little bit and look happy the whole time. Absolutely love it. So here's some information that I think us Americans need to recognize and realize. And Global News Wars had sent this to me earlier, and so I want to give him credit on this, but it ties into what's going on. And I'm pretty shocked at this, but Massachusetts, there's a new bill that's aiming to reduce how many miles people drive. So the goal of the proposed legislation is to keep Massachusetts on the road to a smaller carbon footprint, since transportation accounts for the largest share of emissions in the Bay State. And this was on the 6th, about 7 days ago, that they came out with this. And I mean, I think we could just watch it here. Hold on.
Weekend things to do. Break out that pink outfit because you can celebrate the start of cherry blossom season.
Ooh,
Okay.
okay.
Club, they're hosting their...
Okay, that is not the right one. So it says here, new bill proposed in Massachusetts aims to reduce how many miles people drive in their cars. Lawmakers say the goal, and this is 15-minute city stuff if you don't know. All right. Lawmakers say the goal is to reduce the state's greenhouse gas emissions. While no specific mileage was listed, the bill. Oh, there you go. No specific mileage was listed. Of course. So, it could even be just a little bit of mileage, and they can, reduce how, so it all comes into play. Oh, we're going to talk about some stuff here today. But anyways, the bill would require Massachusetts Department of Transportation to set goals to reduce the number of statewide driving miles in general. The proposal is a push to align the state's transportation plans with its climate mandates and is based on similar laws in Colorado and Minnesota. So it looks like the liberal states are kicking into action already, just like they did during the first lockdown. They implemented things first, little trickle of stuff, just like a harvest. there's a few peppers, and then boom, you got a flood of peppers that you're harvesting. You're in up to your eyeballs, and you don't even know what to do. And so that's just trickle, and then comes the flood here soon. And you're gonna know it when you see it. They're gonna be like, well, Josh was talking about that little by little, and then all of a sudden, wham! The semi hits you and sends you sailing. All right. You just hope you're wearing your bubble wrap. All right. So prepare and get yourself all wrapped in bubble wrap, because that's what you're going to need to survive what's coming. The bill would establish a new council to find ways to make public transportation more accessible for residents, looking at solutions like trains, ferries, buses, bike paths, and more. So they want you to become dependent on government transportation rather than yourself. This sounds like exactly what we're going to be talking about in a little bit. And honestly, like, you can go look this up yourself, NBCBoston.com. New bill aims at reducing how many miles people drive in Massachusetts. But I have a lot to talk about still, and I don't want to be live all day. All right, so I am going to move forward here. Give me a moment here. So I'm going to, okay, so I thought this one was interesting. Give me a second here. This one was interesting. Italy's defense minister, I don't know how to say her name, Guido Crosetto, I don't know, on the Iran war. This is what she says. This is a quote. I am forced to know things that no longer let me sleep for what could happen in the coming weeks, for the effects it will have on the economy and our daily lives. Think about that for a moment. Now watch this. LaRepublicaX.com. So the actual source, watch this. Oh, they removed it. I see. So they removed the actual comment where she's saying that. That's not good. And the comment was, I am forced to know that this is the defense minister. Oh, maybe it's that dude. Sorry, it's a dude. Guido Crosetto on the Iran war. He says, I am forced to know things that no longer let me sleep for what could happen in the coming weeks, for the effects it will have on the economy and our daily lives. And this was March 30th, 2026. Look at that. Look at that. This was a while ago, and look what's happening now. I wonder what's coming. I wonder what's coming that's keeping a defense minister from sleeping at night. I wonder what's coming. Can you tell me? It don't look good to me. And it really feels like things are all lining up. Now look at this one. Give me a second here. France confirms oil crisis and says 30 to 40% of Gulf energy infrastructure is destroyed. And how much of the Gulf energy infrastructure is the actual energy infrastructure for the world? It's not 30, 40%, because that's just 30, 40% of Gulf energy infrastructure. So we're talking what? 15, 20% of the world's energy infrastructure is destroyed? Think about that for a moment. I'm going to get a drink here. Hold on. Think about that for a moment, because that would have to mean that, 20 to 15% of the world's infrastructure, because the majority of the infrastructure is in the Gulf. The pipelines and the shipping and all that stuff. And all the refineries that have been destroyed, the major refineries. So France is confirming this. They're saying they're acknowledging that this much has been destroyed of the infrastructure. And this is all during the time that the Bilderberg group meets. And I've already given you the list of the names in past lives. So you can go look that up and scan through it and find where I'm showing the Bilderberg list. And I've shown you the itinerary in the beginning of this live, what they plan to do, what they're talking about, and it all lines up with what's happening right now. And so there's a lot I want to talk about right here, but I want to first go back over something that I did in the previous live that I did about this stuff. Not the last one, but the one before that. And I want to talk about that Governor Gretchen Whitmer issued an executive order. Understand what that means. Understand what an executive order is and what it does. Declaring an energy emergency. So an emergency executive order, and what that consists of, and what happened during the we'll just say COVID-19 pandemic, during the declaration of an emergency executive order, and what that entailed after that. Okay. So this was on April 2nd, 11 days ago. This happened in Michigan, and California is absolutely following suit. And we're going to get into that in a little bit. I promise things are getting strange. All right. And, you know, but if we focus, and I just kind of want to go through some stuff here, and I took some notes, and I got a bunch of stuff that I'm going to read off here. But if we focus on, the strictly observable actions that have been happening, and the patterns of behavior and the infrastructure changes that are taking place, and obviously all the policy enforcement mechanisms and whatnot, and the real world outcomes, rather than, the rhetoric that's being spewed. Okay. Many countries are already steering toward systems that resemble energy lockdowns. And I've been saying this for the past month and a half. It's getting worse and worse and worse. And, they're not going to call them energy lockdowns. They're going to call them something different. And that's what I've been trying to tell you since the very beginning of this, is they're going to change the verbiage that's being used. They're going to change the wording that they're going to use. They're going to call it a crisis, or, they're going to say climate and this and that. They're going to try to fancy it up. They're going to try to church it up. But it's an energy lockdown, because trust me, once they have it all in place, they're gonna crack down even more. 2 weeks to flatten the curve, 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and that's 2 inches, 2 inches, 2 inches, and they keep turning the handle 2 inches, and it's tightening down as they keep going. The vice is tightening; it's not loosening. I've not felt any I got to be careful what I say here. I have not felt them unclamping, with the vice that they have squeezing us all. Okay. And, there's mandated demand, and I'm talking globally here in multiple countries already. All right. There's at least 40 or 50 countries that are being moved in this direction. And that's a good chunk of the world. That's like a quarter of the world almost. Maybe a little less than quarter of the world is already putting this stuff into place, and then there's a whole bunch more that are talking about it. And we're talking mandated demand reduction and behavioral controls like rationing and speed limits and remote work pushes. And obviously the grid being fragile from over reliance on, like, the rechargeable stuff. So the grid is extremely fragile because of all the electric vehicles and all that stuff. And obviously their data centers and all this stuff. But all the what they would call intermittent renewables. Okay. And then the smart meters that they can use for remote curtailment. They knew it was coming way back then. That's why they got to put in the smart meters. That's why I got to switch us over. And the phase outs of the reliable fossil fuel infrastructure, the gas and all that stuff. That's what's happening. They're all working together. They're all working together to bring this about. And obviously, with the new digital IDs and all that stuff, they're going to have, carbon prices and taxes that punish consumption. I've shown you videos. I've shown you videos of what it's going to be like when this thing, and I'll probably show it at the end of the live today. But you know, I've shown you what life is going to be like in this stuff that's coming, and it's miserable, miserable. Everything stripped away from you, and the electric vehicle ice bans. You know, with all that being said, you know, quote unquote energy lockdown. It means enforced limits on energy use like electricity, fuel, heating, and travel. And obviously, they're going to use mandates and they're going to use pricing signals and physical shortages. And that's exactly what they did. They tested it during the COVID-19 lockdown for the big implementation. That's what it kind of seems like to me, because it's similar to the COVID style restrictions, but this is going to be permanent and energy focused. They're not coming up off of this one. I don't believe that it is. I don't believe that normal's coming back. They let us out. They let us out of it before, but I don't think they're going to let us out of this one. And so I believe that God's going to have to come get his people. I think time is short, and God's going to have to come get his people, because stuff is about to get really, really rough globally, and almost darn near impossible to share the gospel out in the streets. You know, if you're not allowed to go anywhere or do anything, and you got to be at home, and it's a lockdown again and all that stuff, but it's to save the earth. And boy, does it go back to that, like Captain Planet, you know, fire, water, wind, earth, you know, when my powers are combined, they summon this Captain Planet, dude. And it was that Ted guy that used to run CNN. What's his name? I forget his name. Ted Turner, that's what it was. He paid for that. But that, you know, even those kind of shows programmed, you know, the hippies and, you know, I mean, I liked that show when I was a kid. I didn't know what it meant. But now that I do, it's obviously programming to program people to become green and save the earth, you know. And I mean, we should be good stewards of the earth. Don't get me wrong. Like, it's God's creation, right? We should be good stewards of the animals and just all, you know, everything, and be respectful of God's creation, but not worship it. And these people worship nature. They worship nature. That's the number one. These people that run the world, they even the Illuminati, witches, warlocks, you know, Buddhists and pagans and all that. They all, and Satanists alike, they all worship nature. They worship the created rather than the creator. It's a direct snub in the face of God. And so, you know, they're working towards these restrictions, and they want to preserve nature, and they want to get mankind kicked out because they want the world for themselves. Or they'll just destroy it, and they'll take all this stuff and go pretend to play Star Trek out in outer space, which ain't gonna happen. There's no way for them. I don't believe anything's going to the moon. I don't believe anything's going past the moon. Lucky to get up above the clouds in a plane, in my opinion. I don't think any of that stuff is real. I really don't. I think it's good smoke and mirrors, and it's a good distraction for such a time as this. But there's a clear pattern: aggressive decarbonization and underinvestment in dispatchable baseload like coal, gas, and nuclear. The vulnerability and the supply shocks that are hitting those vulnerabilities. And obviously, this is a recurring crisis where the government is going to step in with top-down controls. At least 40 or 50 countries are already implementing or locked into pathways that will culminate in some form of an energy lockdown. If the current trajectory holds, it could turn around. I don't think it's gonna. And they psyched you out before and thought it was going to turn around with their ceasefire that lasted like an hour and a half, not even. And then there was missiles flying. There is no peace right now. There's no peace and safety right now. That's not this time right now. The Antichrist ain't here yet. And so there's a whole bunch of people that are getting in on this thing, like, you know, the EU bloc, you know, the UK, obviously, and Canada and Australia. And there's several US states that are way on board with this, and you don't even know. And I'm about to share with that with you today. There's several US states that are getting up in this and are getting involved, becoming a part of this thing. And I'll tell you, I think they're the next ones in line to declare an energy lockdown. But obviously China's involved. And there's other developing nations that are accelerating green transitions. And a lot of rolling blackouts are already happening, but this is going to bring about blackouts, whether people like to believe so or not. And I'm not promising, but I in my gut feel like this summer is going to be a hot summer when the power goes out. And I really hope people can take measures to try to stay cool, even if it's planting a tree in your yard so you can sit in the shade of it. Not every country's at the same stage, obviously, so you got to take that into account. Some are in pilot or mandate phase, and others are in their active, rationing and rolling blackout cycle phases. But the direction is consistent, the way that the world is going. They want you to prioritize climate-aligned restrictions over energy abundance is the reality of this thing. That's why they're selling the little houses to you and stuff like that, which I think they're cool. I like small things. I could live in one of those. My wife does not want to. I would totally would rather have a piece of land in the mountains and have a tiny home and live in that and have a wood stove and like do my own thing. You know what I mean? Have everything that's fixable, easy, like nothing overly complicated. Maybe build a cabin or something. A cabin garage would be fun over time, or, just whatever, having trees and living in the mountains. I would love that. Can't do that, but I would love that. My wife, however, she would not want to live that way. I understand that. I respect her. But that's where, they want you to go with it. And I mean, I wouldn't mind living like that. I don't mind, conserving and whatnot, living that lifestyle. But, it's going to be to the point where it's going to be too much. And they're really pushing mandates that are going to take away the ability to have choice in what you want to do with your life. Do you want to drive to grandma's house for Thanksgiving? Well, not if there's a 15-minute city implementation and you have borders that you have to abide by unless you have papers to get outside those borders. You caught outside those borders, you go to jail. You don't pass go and you don't collect $200. That's for sure. If the military don't drag you off and throw you in a camp because you ain't listening. And like Joe Biden said, to fight this new world order that's coming, you're going to have F-16s. So there's all sorts of countries that are involved in this. All sorts of countries that are involved in this. Give me a moment here. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard about this, but the 2035 ice phase out. And it's about getting rid of the combustible engine. So everything that has to do with gas and oil, but it's like this plan, and there's documentation on it. I'm just not going to show it. It's kind of complicated, I'm not going to lie, from what I found. But there's this 2035 ice phase out that's about, the ice means, something combustible engine. I forget what it was. And there's all sorts of countries, United Kingdom is on board and Canada's on board. And I'm going to get into the United States here in a moment, but Australia is on board and China, Japan, South Korea, Singapore, India, Bangladesh, Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia. It's funny because all those are the countries that are implementing restrictions right now. In Asia, anyways. South Africa's on board. Brazil is on board. Chile, Ethiopia, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Cambodia, Myanmar, Cuba. And it's funny because Cuba's having blackouts now all of a sudden and fuel shortages. Starts to make sense, don't it? Ecuador, Kenya, Zambia, all involved in this thing. And so they all want to get rid of oil and gas. They're all on board with it, even though they act like they're all upset about it. They're not. They're smiling behind closed doors. And like I showed you earlier, Governor, and listen, if you think, and you're not living in Michigan, that's okay. But you better listen to what's happening in Michigan, because that way you can understand what's coming to your state. And I'm going to name a few states here in a moment that are involved in this. And this is kind of the culmination of all this information I've been talking about today. I'm a little bit scatterbrained today, and I'm sorry. I have a headache and just trying to get by here. So I'm going to talk about this emergency declaration that Gretchen Whitmer declared, and it was Executive Order 2026-4 that was put into place on April 2nd, 2026. And it was citing an impending or present energy shortage under Michigan Law, Public Act 191 of 1982, MCL 10.81 ET SEQ sequence, I think it is. And a separate earlier order, 2026-2 in March, also referenced energy emergency powers. And a lot of people didn't catch that one. But the governor can suspend statutes, rules, and orders of state agencies if strict compliance would hinder coping with the emergency. This is broad executive flexibility. So it's open-ended. Like, she declared this, and she says, it's so that way we can still sell you the winter fuel that's cheaper than the summer fuel that's more expensive because of, certain additives that are taken and added, whatever. Okay. But that's what she says it's for, because she wants to suspend the low vapor pressure fuel requirements in 8 populous southeast Michigan counties like Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, Washtenaw, Livingston, Monroe, St. Clair, and Lenawe counties. And she says that this is going to go until July. And it says, or longer if extended by legislature. So they can extend it. But at this point, this is until July 1st. And so this is supposed to let cheaper, higher vapor pressure gasoline blends like E15 be sold. And they're aiming to lower pump prices by, listen here, it makes a whole lot of sense to declare an energy emergency so that way you save 10 to 20 cents per gallon. That's a great deal, isn't it? To take your freedom away so that way you save 10 to 20 cents per gallon. That's just a couple of bucks per tank load. Just a couple of bucks. So, for that reason, they're not going to lower their, taxes or anything like that because, they are the government and they have more money than the people. They're going to declare an energy emergency instead to be able to do that. That's not why they're declaring this energy emergency. It's so they have an open door to put their foot in your freedoms, is the reality of what's happening right here. And of course, there's exemptions for the motor carriers hauling propane and heating oil from hours of service rules to ensure supply. But the law defines an energy emergency loosely as any condition endangering health, safety, welfare due to energy shortage. And once it's declared, it creates a legal precedent for the governor to act unilaterally, potentially including rationing signals, demand management, or suspending other rules. This obviously mirrors her broad COVID emergency This obviously mirrors her broad COVID emergency powers that she put into place. They really expanded her executive reach. It sounds like she's doing the same thing again. If there's a prolonged shortage, this framework logically enables escalation. And they got to start somewhere. They got to start spoon feeding it to you somewhere. If this is what this is, and I get the feeling in the pit of my stomach. I can't shake it. And I don't get that all the time. I got this feeling in the pit of my stomach that there's a lockdown and rolling blackouts and chaos coming. And I mean, like, I again, like I was trying to say earlier, and I forgot, now I remember, again, talking about the purge type scenario, I don't think it's going to be like, a day of violence. It's going to be a season of chaos where, like in other countries that we've seen it, where everything's kind of cut loose to, in an emergency response and all that, like police and firefighters and the EMS workers and all that stuff. They're not going to be there. You ain't going to be able to call 911 during this time. And I'm just trying to educate people enough to where they see that they need to prepare for this season so that way they don't have to go out in a situation that's dangerous. Again, I want to see all of my brothers and sisters in Christ and the people that come here be able to get to the finish line. And I'm not saying freak out, panic, and all that stuff. But what I am saying is take an account of how much you have, how much that's going to last you. What can you do? How can you budget your money to be able to get maybe some ramen, rice, and beans? I always kind of joke around, but it's pretty staple. Some canned meats, like Spam. Yeah, that's a really great addition. So it's in reality, it's me trying to warn you and say, hey, look, this stuff seems like it's coming down the line. And I don't want to see you get hurt unnecessarily because you're out trying to get a can of green beans for your family to eat. And that's all that's left on the store shelves when you get there, and risk your life going to get it. I want you to stay home, be in prayer, and be watching because Jesus is coming. If we are watching, we would prepare to last and endure what is about to happen. And it's not great tribulation. It's order ab chaos, order out of chaos. That chaos is happening. I mean, what do you think the beginning of sorrows is? It ain't the beginning of happiness. It's the beginning of sorrows. And we've been in it. It's been getting worse. And I just want to see people get to the finish lines before, so when the rapture happens, you're safe at least, right? They're not trying to impose harsh lockdowns today. That's not the idea. But they're going to build the mechanisms, and they're going to normalize emergency governance over energy access incrementally is what I believe is happening right now. And I believe that blackouts and price spikes are going to worsen, and that the renewal and extension of these mandates that are coming are going to become the normal. And it's going to, these energy, if you get an energy emergency declaration in your area, you better get ready. You better start listening. Better start paying attention. This is a pattern where temporary emergencies test compliance infrastructure. It's just the reality of it. And that, you're going to have an army to fight the U.S. government. And with the technology I've shown you in the past, the robots and the robot dogs and the drones and everything, there ain't no running or kind of coming against what's coming. You can only kind of just lay low. Just lay low. You don't have to go fight. You need to abide under the shadow of the Almighty and allow Jesus to be your shelter in this storm up until he comes and gets his bride. Whatever this thing's going to be, however long it's going to be, I believe it's going to be during this that we're going to go home. That's what I believe. And I believe that's the enemy's plan too, because he wants to trick the world into believing that the aliens took us. But that's not what happened. That's not what happens. The promise is in the Word of God that Jesus is going to come get his people. And so with that being said, here are some states that are already lining up. There's, roughly 13 to 17 states plus DC are the furthest along on the path of mandates that are leading to energy lockdown style controls. And a lot of this is starting with the aggressive ZEV and EV sales, the ZEVs and the EV sales requirements, the electric vehicles, and again, how they're phasing out the combustible engine vehicle sales by 2035. Isn't that funny? 2035. That's why they call it, ICE 2035. Because they want to get rid of all these vehicles by 2035 and have a renewable, heavy grid policy. And obviously, it's going to be a smart grid and all that. And there's going to be all sorts of this implementation because of it. But it starts with that aggressive ZEV and EV sale requirements. So California led the way on those ZEV or ZEV mandates, phasing towards 100% new zero emissions passenger vehicles by 2035 with interim ramps. Advanced clean cars rules like heavy renewables push with known rolling blackout risks. Kind of, paraphrasing here, but and the demand of response programs and fleet electrification mandates. Colorado's adopting the same California-style ZEV standards. And they want to ramp it up to high ZEV percentages by early 2030s. And they have clean energy goals, straining the grid. ZEVs and LEV adoption in Connecticut, state fleet electrification pushes. And in Delaware, their ZEV mandates aligned with California timeline. So I'm not going to go through everything, but there's altogether, and if you hear your state, you can know that, and I'm going to get to a point here, all right? I'm getting to a point here, all right? We're getting there. There's California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Illinois, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, okay, Minnesota, Nevada, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, Oregon, Rhode Island, Vermont, Virginia, and Washington State. And there's other states with different, little things in them, that kind of are trickling to the same conclusion. But I'm not going to name those because it's not a lot of proof, but actually I'll name them, but it's just, they're not as bad towards it, but they're getting there. It's like Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, Tennessee, Mississippi, Pennsylvania, Ohio, New Jersey, Florida, Arizona, North Carolina, Nevada. But with the strongest ZEV style mandates, there's, I think it's like 17 states or whatever that restrict future consumer choices in vehicles. That's important because that's some of the first phases in this thing. They've been implementing it for a long time. They've known this is coming. They're just finally pulling the trigger, in my opinion. They're forcing you into electrification, which is going to spike the grid demand and enable smart rationing via charging controls. So they want to get you on a system where everything needs to be on electricity so that way they can control that system, and they can't control that system that great with fuel. You see what I'm saying? So if you include states with renewable portfolio standards, with demand response of smart grid rollouts or documented blackout vulnerabilities, the number rises to 20 plus states, showing actions consistent with preparing for scarcity management over abundance. And obviously, not every state is in an emergency declaration like Michigan is. But the infrastructure that's been put into place, the smart readers for remote, throttling, electric vehicle mandates, adding uncontrollable, then controllable load, retiring, coal and gas without full replacement. They literally are getting rid of it. And there's some elite that are investing in it because they're going to come back around to it after all the damage is done. That's what the future holds. But it's being built in all these places I just shared with you in all these different states. And the federal shifts, like the challenges to California waivers and the national energy emergency declarations, are going to create pushback. But obviously, the liberal states are going to double down via state law. And so, if you're in a red state, you're probably better off, but you're not out of the woods. Because they can't lock down unless the states get behind it. It has to be at the state level when things get locked down. And so, the data centers, they don't make it any easier at all. And so, I really feel like this summer is going to be difficult, and the writing is on the wall. The writing is all over the news. And it's funny because they're telling you, but they're not telling you. They're holding back something. And if they were just coming out and saying, "Oh, the end of the world is here, prepare yourselves," I'd be like, I don't believe it. But they're talking about it, but they're holding back critical information. And then because they're doing that, that leads me to believe they're pulling the trigger. In everything that they've been doing, implementing the smart meters and the smart grid and the 5G towers and the electric vehicles and all this different stuff, it shows me that they've known that this is coming for a long time, and that they have to have a lot of stuff in place to make it work. But now they have like this controllable system in play. They already did the dress rehearsal with the COVID-19 lockdown. And so everything that's happening seems to be culminating to this moment. And again, in order for the Antichrist to solve all the world's problems, they have to create the crisis so that way they have the problem and then they have the reaction of the public so they can bring in the solution, which is a one world ruler. That's what all of this is about at its core, is bringing in their king of despotism, the Antichrist of the Bible, the 12th Imam of the Muslims, the Mahdi or whatever. Then you have Buddha Maitreya for the Hindus and the Buddhists and all them, and all this different stuff for the divine child or whatever for paganism and Wicca and all that, and Satanism and all that stuff, right? So they have all these different people expecting even the Jews are expecting this false Messiah, because their brain, Jews, obviously rejected the true Messiah. Okay, so the world is primed and ready to go through chaos to get them primed and ready to accept a one world ruler. And it's basically, from what I can gather from my research, is that the same way in like Mind Control or MK Ultra or Project Monarch, Project Artichoke, Project Montauk, Project Gate, Project Stargate, it don't matter what it is. The same way that they're programming using trauma-based mind control, they're implementing this thing using trauma, and they're going to make it difficult. They want it to be a chaotic situation. The same way 9/11 was. Everybody remembers where they were on 9/11. And for the younger generation, maybe not my generation, but the younger generation, and even maybe some, older folk, whatever, might have seen, the Charlie Kirk assassination as this thing. And I don't care what you believe about the assassination. I'm just saying the trauma that it did to the public was very great. And so they're going to continue to do these things and create these trauma scenarios to where it disassociates you and you accept your programming that they're feeding you more and more and more. I literally, did this, and I'm going to say this here. I literally went and I filmed for my documentary yesterday, and I got to be careful how I say this, but I stumbled upon this image. We'll call it an image, right? And it is the most vile image, right out in the open. Families, children, all this stuff passing by it daily. And I'm talking thousands of people pass by this image, this vile image, and think nothing of it. They think nothing of it. And what's funny is there was multiple vile images. And it's like, they've been programmed to just look past the obvious. People have been programmed to look past and think, oh, you're overthinking it. People could watch this video and say, Josh, you're overthinking this. Well, I wasn't overthinking it a month and a half ago, and here we are. And so I wonder where we're going to be in another month and a half. And so I was doing this filming, and I just couldn't believe, I was doing some filming of this, and I got film of this vile image, and it's so bad in my documentary that's coming, I'm going to have to blur out sections of this vile image. That's how bad it is. Your jaw is going to drop when the documentary comes out, when I show you this vile image. You're going to be like, are you serious? That's in full public display? I'm going to say, oh, yeah. Yeah, it is. To the point where this lady comes up next to me, and I'm not going to tell you what she was doing, but she didn't know I was filming this vile image, and she thought I was looking at something else. And she commented on the something else and said, oh, yeah, I'm doing this too, blah, 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 and takes a picture. And I thought to myself, man, lady, you don't see that right in front of you? Holy cow. I couldn't believe it. It blew my mind away. Here we are standing in front of this vile image, and she doesn't even acknowledge it or address it. And yeah, why do they have that there? I think I can tell you why, but I'll do it in my documentary. But it's absolutely disgusting that people are that far gone and can't see what's happening and see the writing on the wall that's taking place right now. It's the same kind of way. They've been showing it to you so much, and through the past, 10 years or whatever, getting you ready for this, that everybody's kind of like, oh man, this will probably it'll come back around the other way. Even if it does for a little bit, like it did, the price went from, and I'm talking the futures price, it went at the time, it was like $113 a barrel, and it came down to 74 something, I think it was, overnight, basically, because people thought it was opening back up. People want everything to be okay. It's not okay. Everything is not okay right now. And I'm here to tell you that. All right? I get this gut feeling deep, deep down inside that this ain't going to be easy getting out of here, but we are getting out of here. I'm just going to put it to you straight. So, I did what I had to do. I came on here. I warned people. The blood is not on my hands if something is to happen and take place. I pray it doesn't. I pray that making a video like this, that maybe other people, make videos like this, and that there's a huge mass movement of sharing this kind of information so that way they can't pull it off right now. But I think they're going to do it. I mean, they're already declaring their energy emergencies and stuff. Trump did it the first day he was in office. I think it was January 20th, 2025. Yeah, he declared a national energy emergency, and it's still in play. So the things that a state can do, he don't even need to declare an energy emergency because he already did. And now the states are falling in line. Now you got Michigan, probably California next, then probably New York. Mom Donnie will get in line of it. And then trickle by trickle, your freedoms get taken away from you. I pray people are listening. I really do. I love you guys. I appreciate you guys coming today. Believe in Jesus. He's the only way out of this. May he bless you all. May he keep you. Go out there and change this world in which you live.